the knowing with which you know your experience, is the only knowing there is. It is the knowing of pure consciousness or awareness. Now, instead of using that knowing, the light of knowing, to know objects, to know things that seem to be other than yourself, turn that light of knowing on itself. Ask yourself, what is the nature of the knowing with which I know my experience? What is the nature of the awareness with which I am aware of my experience? Now, who is aware of the awareness with which you are aware of your experience? Only awareness. Therefore, awareness has to turn its awareness on itself. Knowing has to shine the light of its attention. Instead of shining it towards the apparent object, it has to shine it back on itself. But as we discussed over the last few days, it's not really a turning around of the attention or a shining of the attention, because attention, knowing, is too close to itself to be able to turn round and look at itself, like the sun is too close to itself to be able to turn round and shine on itself. So it is rather a falling back of the attention. That is how we come to know ourselves as we truly are. This sinking or falling back of the attention into its source, into its self. That is how we can know. So the very knowing now with which you are knowing this experience, this conversation that you and I are having, is being known by you. This room, the sight of this room, is being known by you, pure knowing. Now, instead of shining that knowing on these words or on this sight, become interested in that knowing itself, not what you know. Forget about what I'm saying. Forget about what you're feeling. Forget about what you're thinking. Ask yourself, what is this knowing with which I know my experience? Go there. That's how the apparently finite mind discovers its true infinite nature.
This morning there was some discussion about witnessing, and I wonder if you could talk briefly about how to discriminate between the separate self's witnessing and consciousness witnessing.
The separate self never witnesses. The separate self is not... The separate self is a thought and a feeling. A thought can't know or witness. A feeling can't know something. It is known or witnessed. So right now, you are witnessing or knowing your experience. We are all knowing our experience. That experience is being known by the only awareness that there is. Infinite awareness. The separate self is a belief and a feeling that that awareness, the only awareness, shares the qualities of the body. So there isn't a real self called awareness and a separate self. There is just one self, awareness, to which thought attributes a limit that properly belongs to the body. And with that belief, the true and only self of infinite awareness seems to become limited and localized. But even when the separate self, even when the true and only self of infinite awareness seems to appropriate the qualities that properly belong to the body, even then, in other words, when it seems to become a separate self, even then the knowing with which the separate self knows its experience belongs to infinite awareness. So right now, you are knowing your experience. That which is knowing it is infinite awareness. But when that infinite awareness is filtered through a separate self, it's not that it flows through the separate self. It's thought. Thought limits that awareness. And so it's thought that says, I, the separate self, am witnessing my experience. And hence we feel, I, the body-mind, am witnessing the world. It's never the case. The body-mind cannot know. It is known. Only awareness is aware. This is really important. Only awareness is aware. A body is not aware. A mind is not aware. Awareness is aware. And there is only one kind of awareness. Eternal, infinite awareness. Right now, the awareness that is knowing our current experience is infinite awareness. So the first step to discover that it is eternal, infinite awareness that is knowing experience is to realize it's not I, the body-mind, that is knowing my current experience. That is, it's not I, the body-mind, that is knowing all objects and others. Right now, it is I, awareness, that is knowing the body-mind world. And is that not your experience now? You're hearing these words, yes? These words are part of the world. In other words, they're outside of you, supposedly. You're seeing these flowers. You're knowing these flowers. You're knowing these words. You're knowing the sight of this room, yes? Are you not also knowing your thoughts and feelings? Do they not appear as objects to you, just as the sight of the flower or the sound of this voice? Now, the you that is knowing them is not a thought. It knows your thoughts. It's not a feeling. It knows your feelings. It's not a perception. It knows your perceptions. It's not a sensation. It knows your sensations. That you is awareness. That's the first step, to realize that right now it is awareness that is aware of the body-mind world. It is not the body-mind that is aware of the world. That's the first step. Now the second step is then, that step, as we said this morning, it only relieves awareness of a partial limitation, the limitation that belongs to the body-mind. But it doesn't relieve awareness of being located. The awareness that we have discovered ourselves to be could still be located and limited. So we have to further explore awareness to discover its nature. Now, when we say we have to further explore awareness, who is it that can know anything about awareness?
Awareness.
Awareness, because awareness is the only one that is aware. So when we say we explore awareness, we don't mean thought explores awareness. Thought doesn't know anything of awareness. Thought can only know an object. So to explore awareness, when we say we then have to explore awareness, we have to go to awareness's experience of itself. We have to ask awareness, how do you find yourself? What is your experience of yourself? And that is the process that we were speaking of this morning, with this collapse of attention. We cease shining our attention. When I would say our attention, we cease shining awareness's attention, awareness's knowing on objects, and we seem to turn it back round on itself. In fact, we don't turn it back round on itself because its knowing never left itself. So there is a collapse or a relaxation of our attention, of awareness's attention from objects, and attention flows back to its source. And so the way awareness knows itself is by being itself. So this, and in this abidance as ourself, the memory of its own eternity comes to it. when I say the memory, I don't mean that it comes from the past. I mean that it comes from deep within itself. It's like waking up in the morning and you know you had a dream, and the dream's not in focus yet. And you know the dream was important. You want to remember the dream. What do? You can't go after the dream because it's not yet there. There's just the perfume of the dream that remains, and you know from its perfume that the dream was significant. You start looking around in the mind, you're always looking in the wrong direction. So there's a kind of relaxation of your looking. You open yourself, and it's like you just invite or allow the dream to come back to you. And it's like it comes back to you, but from deep within you, the dream returns. The dream images begin to come back. That's what I mean by memory. From deep within us, the memory of our own eternity returns to us. So, understand first of all that by perception, I mean the 5 sense perceptions: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. And each of these sense perceptions confer upon the world its own respective quality. So seeing confers on the world the quality of the seen. For instance, take this blue cloth. Without seeing, there is no blueness there. Yes? We can't say that the blueness is in the cloth, because blueness is in the experience of seeing. Yeah? So it is seeing that adds blueness to the cloth, or colour to the world. Yes? Now, if we want to find what the world is by itself, what the world is independent of perception, we want to know what it is in itself before perception has superimposed its particular qualities on it. So you remove all the seen qualities from the world. Yeah? You still hear it, taste it, touch it, and smell it, but you no longer see it. Yes? There are no colours there.
Remove, you mean just
Remove.
by closing your eyes?
Well,
Or-
you could do it by closing your eyes. Okay, you could close your eyes. Now the world, it still exists. You still hear it, smell it, touch it, and taste it, but you can no longer see it. Yes, because you've removed the experience of seeing. Okay, now remove the experience of hearing as well from the world. And now remove the experience of tasting. And now remove the experience of smelling. And finally touching. Because all these belong to the mind, or to sense perception. So what remains of the world after we have removed all the qualities that are superimposed upon it by sense perception?
I don't think I know how to remove those.
Well, you just do it in your imagination. To take this experience of the room. The room is present, yes? That's its first quality. It is. It exists. Yes? Something, whatever it is, it exists. Yeah? And it exists, the way we perceive it is through seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. Now remove all those qualities. What remains?
Well, space is probably the only word.
Well, you have go further, because what knowledge of space do you have? You're going in the right way, but go a bit further, because without seeing, what knowledge of space do you have? You see, seeing confers space upon reality. So take space away. What remains? Can you go even further back than space?
Well, a namelessness.
Yes, perfect. A namelessness. Something that has no name and has no form. Because it is the senses that confer form upon the reality of the world. Without seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling, the world has no form. And without thought, it has no name. As you rightly said, what remains is nameless and formless. Yeah?
Yes.
But in other words, it's just pure existence. Nameless, formless being. The isness of the world. Prior to the arising of thought or perception. Yes? Now, existence comes from two Latin words meaning ex and sisteria, meaning to stand out from. So this nameless, formless being doesn't stand out. You can't see it or hear it or taste it. Yeah? It is thought and perception that bring the world, that make it stand out as something with a name and a form. It is thought and perception that gives the world this formless being, this nameless, formless being, a name and a form. Prior to the arising of thought and perception, there is just infinite being. Why is it infinite? Because there are no divisions there. There are no forms. There are no separate colors or shapes or sounds or sights or tastes or textures. It's like the screen before the image has appeared on it. When the image appears, the screen seems to be broken up into a multiplicity and diversity of objects. The objects seem to exist, but when the movie finishes, there's just an infinite screen, a screen with no boundaries, with no divisions. But it can't be seen within the limits of the metaphor. It doesn't exist, it is. It hasn't come into existence. So it is thought and sense perception that bring the world out of being, out of infinite being, into existence. So, I'm just going to go on a little bit from there. Now, do the same exercise not with the world, but with yourself. You, the one that is aware of your experience. Yes? What you call I is that which is aware of experience. Yes? Now, remove everything that thought and perception has added to that I. What do you end up with?
Kind of being.
Yeah, exactly. And what kind of being?
Well, no kind.
Well, no kind. In other words, a being that has no nameable or perceivable qualities. In other words, it is infinite. It is just the pure I am. Now, so we've explored the world, and we've discovered prior to the arising of the mind and perception, it is just infinite being. We've explored ourself and discovered that ourself, prior to the arising of thought and perception, is just infinite being. Now, how many infinite beings can there be?
One.
Exactly. That is the great realization of the spiritual traditions and religious traditions. In the Christianity, when it says, I and my Father are one, it means what I essentially am and my Father, the ultimate reality of the universe, what it essentially is one. There are not two things. There is not a self and a world. There are not two things. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. It is this is the collapse of the distinction between self and other.
And this is experienceable.
Absolutely. What we do in these retreats is, in our conversations like this, we explore and we excavate the belief systems that our culture is founded. Our world culture is founded on the belief that experience is divided into two essential ingredients: self and other, mind and matter, me and not me. This is the founding principle upon which all other thoughts, in which all our thoughts are based, and not only all our thoughts and feelings, but our subsequent activities and relationships are based on this belief. So in our conversations we are excavating, exploring, excavating and breaking up these beliefs. And then in our morning meditations, in our Shiva Shakti meditations in the morning, we are trying to experience the body and the world in a way that is consistent with our new understanding, so that we don't just have a good non-dual understanding, but we carry on feeling, acting, perceiving and relating on behalf of a temporary self. We actually feel in a way, and as a result act, relate and perceive in a way that is consistent with our understanding.
Right, so it's always, for me, the trying to put together understanding and then the living of that understanding. So when you said this morning, absent thought or perception, that's on a level of, that's on an understanding, it's on an abstract level.
Okay, but now, having understood, having explored your experience and come at least to the intellectual understanding, yes, the reality of the world is the same as the reality of myself. Then start to treat the world in that way. You start with treating animals and people like that. That they are literally, they are yourself. But don't limit it to animals and people. Extend it to so-called dead inert matter, because your experience is that you've never experienced stuff called dead inert matter. All you've experienced of this so-called dead inert matter is seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling. Have you ever experienced anything of the world apart from seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling?
No.
Has anybody?
No.
No. See, nobody's ever found this stuff called matter. So instead of treating objects as if they were made out of this dead inert stuff called matter, which nobody has ever found, treat it in a way that is consistent with your experience. Treat it. Now, go further. What is the stuff that seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling is made of? Let me ask you the question in a different way. Is there anything there? Is there anything present in the experience of seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling other than knowing?
No.
Okay, so let's reduce it. Having reduced the world to seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling, we can reduce them to pure knowing. So all you ever experience is this pure knowing, which pervades all experience but doesn't share the limits of any particular experience. So treat the world like that. When you're holding the microphone, don't feel I've got a dead, inert object in my hand made out of matter. Feel that consciousness is vibrating, is totally alive and vibrating in that experience. And see how the world responds to you when you treat it like that.
Yeah.
See how your friends respond to you when you treat them in that way. Because that is the confirmation. The response we get in our experience is the confirmation of the truth of what we are saying. It's not enough just to have a clear non-dual formulation. That's not enough. The confirmation comes in our experience. It's called happiness. or love or beauty.